welcome to this week's episode of the Ratliff Mandolins Weekly Production Diary. And in this episode, I'm going to share with you all of the jigs and tools and steps that it takes to take a roughly hewn neck and turn it into a finished neck, finely sized. Probably we'll sand it down to 100 grit or so. As it stands right now, we have necks that were roughed out and the fretboards were glued on. They don't really match here. There's a little bit of overhang and nothing is really shaped or sized where we want it. So let's just take a look at all of the, like I said, all of the tools and steps and everything that it takes to get a neck down to where you're basically ready to get it ready to shoe finish on it. Now we're going to do this with an A-style neck, and I've got 4 A-styles in this batch, and I've already done the neck for mandolin number 1, so we'll pick mandolin number 8 to do it with. And the reason that I'm going to do it with an A-style is so that I can get some close-up shots of either side of this neck so you can see the work without the scroll of an F-style blocking the way. So we'll just do this for, it's not, the whole process and procedure doesn't change with an F-style. It's just a little more difficult having to get in there underneath that scroll. And if we do it with an A-style, then you'll be able to see both sides real good. Let's start with the holder jigs. I actually have jigs to hold these mandolins in different shapes that I have made. I've also got 2 guide rails here and a bar and some threaded rod to clamp these jigs down. And I will explain this jig to you. Just slides right in there in those guide bars. These things will clamp down, and this thing is held out here pretty well. Let me grab a mandolin real quick. This is a 2x. It has a plate on this side made out of 1x shelving board. Now inside here is this 2x is cut out so that this mandolin will fit down in here. Either way, everything is padded out, and then we have another board here on the outside that will clamp down on it. So this is a very good jig for holding a mandolin like this and working on it, or like this, sort of interchangeable. Let me give you a shot right down on the inside and see if you can see how we've sawn that board out. Okay, here perhaps you can see a little better of what I've done. The center 2x8 it was, and I took a mandolin while it was laying flat and just traced half a mandolin on it and flipped that over and traced the other half of the mandolin on it so that I have cut a recessed area for like the body points on an F-style and the scroll up here, and you can just take the mandolin out and flip it over and it'll fit either way. So then I've bolted on and glued on a piece of shelving board cut and shaped to fit, and a little bit of that shelving board was ground out to fit the top or the back of the mandolin where it arches out. Now, and this clamp piece here only is shaped so that it just grabs the mandolin by the very rim, the very edge of the rim, and everything is padded out with leather, and some 3 big bolts run through here with these knobs on there, and you can just do this and clamp right down on the mandolin, and it works very, very well. So that's this jig here. Now this A-style is just going to fit right down in here just like this, and then we'll just tighten these up. Clamps it down, holds it down, and we can work on the sides of the neck or the sides of the mandolin or whatever we need. So this has already been done on this mandolin, but I'll describe this as the first step that we need to take to get this neck ready, and is to trim off any overhang and I usually use needle file or needle rasps to do that, and just very gently go down through there and run the maple down until it actually hits the ebony sides or the binding or whatever treatment this fretboard has got. And so then we want to just basically make everything fit there. And then I want to tackle this area right here, this whole flat place right here. And let's just talk about this for a minute. This neck is going to come out here and kind of round this way. So you'll see a lot of guys that will build their mandolins and they'll round this whole thing from here to here. This joint right here sometimes will come out just like that right there, and I've always felt like that was just a horrible look. So it's one of the first things I look at, and I look at somebody else's mandolin, is how did they treat this neck joint. And I usually, to get the shape that I like, I usually start here at this edge right here where the heel button is, and this edge right here, and I'll put a straight edge on it so that hopefully you can see that we have a shape that's concave right there, which is entirely different than the shape that we're really shooting for out here. So it's kind of hard to get those two surfaces to meld together and be pretty. And so I'll show you what I do. I start with just holding a straight edge right there, and I use these right here. I use a gouge with a fairly weak sweep and an end canal, so I can just kind of slide it along like this. And here about a year or so ago, I actually bought this thing, or actually probably 2 years ago, bought that thing right there off of eBay. It's got a really, really shallow sweep here, and buddy, that thing is just about the perfect shape, and you can just kind of ease right in there and get a nice graceful swoop right in there, which is exactly what you're looking for. And then I will take a rasp, and I'll go from here to here, from this edge to this edge, and I'll just try to hold my hands in exactly the same at the same angle, and then I'll just come out through here and go until I hit, till I've lowered that whole surface right there, until I hit this line right here where the neck joins that glue seam right there where the fretboard is glued on, all the way down and maybe just a little past it right there. So, and then you can just take a piece of glass or a scraper and go from this concave surface and just ease it out just a little bit, and if you can see that if you do this just right, it's not that much of a jump right in that area. You can get everything kind of very smooth and flowing and graceful and pretty, all like that. So that much has already been done on this mandolin, so we're getting ready to do some stuff to this mandolin that hasn't been done yet. And to do that, we're going to put an entirely different jig in this holder. And here it is, and it is a odd looking little thing. It's a single 2x board that's been tapered right in here, and you can't probably see that from the angle you're in, and I'll show that in just a second. This is for the mandolin to sit in upside down so that we can access the neck. Let's take this part right here first. This part right here will slide up and down and can be locked in for different heights. And then as the mandolin sits in here, this one right here will clamp right down onto that. This bit here comes over and locks down, and this, let's take this apart, and you can see it's actually just a piece of wood that will hinge on this piece of leather here, and it's got a height adjustment right down here, and then this locks on, so we can lock it here and here, and we got complete access all the way around, nice and solid, to shape this neck and do whatever we need to do right in here. I forgot to tell you what these slots here were for in this jig, and that is actually to access this thing, which is the sizer for the 8th fret and the 1st fret thicknesses this way of this neck. So what we want to be able to do, if you can see, is to fit that down over there, and it'll slide right on, and when it slides right on, then we'll know that we've got that neck the proper thickness. That way it'll go in here just like this, and then this thing will slide in here this way. And like I said, as you can see, one of them is set for the 1st fret, which is 0.87, and this is 940 thousandths for the distance, the thickness here at the 8th fret. So that's what these slots are for, and you'll see that more in use here in just a few minutes. So now we're going to load the mandolin in this jig. First thing I do is set the height of this piece right here. And I just put it up there till it just barely touches, holding the mandolin more or less flat. Put it up there till it just barely touches. Lock everything down. And then just, I won't snug it down, but that'll just hold it in place for the moment. And we'll come up here, and I will twist this thing until we get the proper angle on that peg head. This allows me, when I'm sawing these peg head angles out and sanding them and everything, lots of times you don't get them exactly the same one to the other. There'll be a degree or two off, and so this little way I've designed this tool will allow me to compensate for the stuff being off just a tad from each other. This locks that part down. Double check everything. Just kind of snug everything down. And now I have the mandolin nice and sturdy and stable, and I can work on it all through here, sanding, rasping, and doing everything. It's not going to try to wander and get away from me. Now, we already have the lines set for the neck being shaped up against the fretboard. Now what we want to do is just make sure that we have the thickness right. That's the next dimension that we kind of want to lock in. And again, I have two dimensions, one at the thickness at the 1st fret, one the thickness at the 8th fret. And the way I do that is I will find that 1st fret when I come here, and I'll just make a pencil mark where that fits right there. And then for the 8th fret, I'll come down here and do the same thing. And if I'm feeling really frisky, I can just take a line like that right there. And I got a pretty good idea that if I take that much wood out, I'll be closing in on it anyway. Just straight across there, flatten that out. So we'll discuss how we're going to get all this out in just a second. But once we do that, we're going to lower this area a little bit, and we'll need to get the profile of the neck we'll need to blend this area in so that it comes out and rolls right into that height that we want, and nice and pretty. And here you'll find and here's a trick for you if you're going to be doing this job. If you take your fingers and just kind of spread them out, you can roll right through there, and you can feel all sorts of little humps and everything. So we want to level this area out right here. Then we want to match that and match it here so that everything is, again, nice and graceful and elegant and no humps and bumps and all that kind of stuff. And then we'll worry about rounding the neck over. But first, let's do that. Well, even before we do that, let's talk about the tools that we're going to be using to do this job. I use a series of rasps. I have a Nicholson that's a favorite, sort of a medium fine cut that I've really about worn out. And as a result of wearing that thing out, I bought this about a year or so ago, and it's a cut-all. I think I ordered it from Woodcraft, and I don't really know how it's made, but it's got a sort of a rough surface, and it actually does a pretty good job. It's a little finer cut than that rasp, but it'll sure remove some wood. And like I said, even if you use one rasp first and then come back over with that cut-all, it gives you a finer surface. And the third thing that I use on a fairly regular basis, as you know, I haven't had this really very long. If you've been following the series, that this was sent to me by as a gift by one of the watchers, and I really like this thing. It's a Shinto rasp, and it will remove a lot of wood. Now, one thing I have found about it is at least for me, it doesn't like to go diagonal. You can feel it, or it scares me because you can feel it flexing a whole lot. So I try to save this for the job that I'm just going to go straight on rather than try to do a drag that way. But that's a Shinto rasp. It's got a coarse and a fine surface, and it's like I said, in the proper place, it does a real good job. And then we are going to use some glass. And if you don't have glass, we can use some scrapers and stuff, but I'll show you all about that as we proceed. So the first thing that we're going to do is just flat out between these pencil lines. And there we have it. Now we're not going to try to make a final thickness right now. We just know that we've got the bulk of it off. Now I am going to just kind of check this whole blend right in here from this flat surface to this flat surface. We just want a nice sweeping curve, and to help me with that, I've got a maple block that I have sanded one side with a gentle curve and the other side is flat. I'm going to take some 60 grit paper and just kind of work that whole area right there. You'll find that this area right here, you want this whole plane to be flat, and then you'll want just a little bit of that flat to bleed on past these corners, and then just kind of flow in if you can. And my fingertips tell me that there's some humps and bumps right there, and we'll get those out in just a second. But for the most part, we're pretty good. But let's go ahead and get those out so you can see that. I keep a little box of glass here. glass is a marvelous scraper. Usually when you break it, one side is sharp and one side's not. I like glass. You can see right through it, and you can see where you're cutting, and you can see where you're not cutting. Unlike a scraper, you can't see the other side. Whoops, didn't mean to hit the camera there. Now that whole transition from one plane to the other is just so smooth that you don't really even realize you're doing it. That's what you're looking for right there. And then here, I just kind of run my finger up through there and make sure that everything kind of flows. Most of the humps are out. Now that I'm pretty sure everything is smooth, we're just going to kind of tweak everything down. We're going to see how far off we are from the final dimensions that we want, and we are ways. So I'm just going to kind of scrape that with a piece of glass. Now sometimes the real curly maple necks won't let you, they don't like to be scraped. And I still don't want to go down to where this thing will fit all, you know, exactly. I just want to get closer. You can see that that glass is a marvelous tool. You want to get the cheapest glass you can lay your hands on. It breaks the sharpest. The good high quality safety glass is not any good at all for this job. Now see, now we're almost there. Almost there. Here's where we're at right at the moment. Everything's relatively smooth and hump free. This area is more or less defined and shaped and sized to pretty close to where we want it. And this is, so really from say here down, all we have to do is just do whatever round over and shaping that we want, smoothing all of these planes and surfaces into each other so that it's a nice smooth flow. Now right here though, we need to, this is the next step that we're actually going to address, is this area right here. And we want to have this line here come down here to a point, and then all this stuff will blend into that point and then round over at the same time. So you're wanting to do two entirely incompatible things at the same time. You want to come to a sharp surface, but you also want it to be rounded. So let's address that for a moment. Now what I have here is an old canister light that a friend of mine gave me probably 30 or 35 years ago. This is the perfect diameter, and so I've used it for 30 years for this job and this job only. And this job is, I'll come down here to about where the first fret's going to lay, right in there. I'll put my two fingers right like this right here, and eyeball more or less right in the center between my two fingers. Now we want to go from this corner to that cross right there, And we're going to use my canister light, and we'll just lay it right there on that corner, bring it around here, touch that cross, put a pencil on it. Now I'm going to do it here, but you probably can't see it because of the camera angle. And I have the shape that I want this whole area to be and flow right into this plane right here. Now let's discuss this little area right here for a minute. This is a place where you'll, another place that if I'm looking at somebody else's mandolin, this is another place that I always look at first to see how gracefully and eloquently that's been done, because this is a very difficult place to make pretty. You realize, of course, that this is flat, this is not. So you're taking a perfectly flat area right here. Let me draw a line, just like that right there. And you're turning it into a perfectly round or V-shaped or half V-shaped or whatever final shape you want for your neck. But it goes from flat to here, and you really and truly don't want to, you don't want to exaggerate that. And you'll see a lot of these guys, sometimes they'll even start right here with this rounded business. And I just don't think it looks pretty at all. I like for mine to be actually flat out here for probably 3/8 of an inch or so down to that line, just completely flat. Just like this surface here is completely flat, completely flat. And then just start your gradual rounding until you get to this one. And it just takes a little bit of practice and an awareness of the fact that you see a lot of these guys and you think, you know what, I don't think you ever really even realize that you're going from a flat to a round. You just made it round, you know. So that's my thoughts and ideas on that. And I do that a lot with I'll start with the rasp and get the bulk of it out, and then I'll go with glass to make sure that I'm round. And the glass also seems to help with keeping this corner right here sharp, because lots of times you see they come up here and then they'll just kind of round over into this corner, and I like to keep that corner sharp as long as I possibly can. So we're just going to back the camera up a little bit so that I can work, and I'm going to do this side and shape it the way I want it. And like I said, we're going to start with this gentle rasp. You want to make sure that you get up to your corner, that pencil line right there, and basically you're going to start straight up and down here, and by the time you're done you're going to be basically perfectly flat here. So that's kind of, and you're wanting to watch this edge and this edge at the same time. You don't want to overcut on either one of them. So just have to be aware of what you're doing. Roll real smooth. Now I have the bulk of the wood taken off. I also have a round piece of plastic. I'm going to hit this with 60 grit paper, not to shape it as much as to smooth some of that out so that the glass will cut better. That's another thing. If you go in on rasp cuts, lots of times that glass just chips off. It doesn't like a real rough surface to work with. About 60 grit paper, and then the glass will cut pretty good. I've got this cut straight, and so I can see right through there. I can see exactly what part of this of wood is not flat. I can see where it's not shaped the way I want it. I'm going to bring it perfectly flat, or as close to it as I can get it. Like I said, out about 3/8 of an inch. Now, I'm going to go all the way around, trying to get this line right here, this pencil line, real crisp. It's really all I'm shooting for. It's just the crispness of that line, and rolling this glass till it's almost flat like we did the rasp just a minute ago. Now, sometimes you have to go both directions with this curly maple. They just, curly maple as a general rule doesn't like to do anything. Pretty stuff, but it ain't easy to work with. Now, as I run my finger over it, I find that I look at it, it's real hard to tell that there's any transition at all. You know, most people just look at a guitar neck and they don't realize, well, we went from flat to a complete half round right here. But we're pretty good. And then after we're going to do this side, then we will round this neck over and kind of shape it, you know, like a V or a complete D neck or whatever some, you know, that we're going to do with it. And then we'll just kind of blend everything in as we go along. But we're getting pretty close to that, having a good shape right there. Now I will do the other side, the treble side here, and you can see the whole process again. have both ends of this neck more or less shaped, probably still a little heavy, but more or less in place and where I want it, shaped the way I want it, and more or less the right size. Still have a flat spot here, and then the bulk of the playing area of this neck is heavy. So, and I should have probably mentioned it earlier, and I'll mention it now. I use a lot of lights here, and I like the lights, just plain old light bulbs, not the LEDs and not the energy savers or any of that. Just a plain old regular old-timey light bulb gives a nice, crisp, sharp shadow. And when you turn it on, everything's going to get yellow. The camera, I can't seem to figure out how to get the yellow out of these shots. But we'll take this light right here and turn it on and get shadows going. And where a shadow is, obviously, where a shadow is and where a shadow isn't, you can tell what needs to be taken off and what needs to not be taken off. The very telling things when you roll this shadow and this light and bring it underneath and look up. So you might see some yellow in some of these upcoming shots. And that's why, because these lights here seem to give a lot of yellow over and above the newer light bulbs. But they give a lot cleaner, crisper shadow, and you can see what you're doing and what you're not. You can see the humps and bumps and all the bad spots a lot better with these light bulbs than you can with these newer ones. So we've got this much more or less shaped and more or less sized. This much more or less shaped and sized as well. So now we're going to go for what's in between. Now I'm going to use these same 3 rasps to go from this glue line here to the very center of the neck. We'll just pencil, say from the center of the heel button till we hit this V place right here. As long as we're pretty close, good approximate line. And I'm going to try to round everything over and smooth everything over till it goes from a more or less vertical line here to a horizontal line there. We'll start with this trusty rasp here, and I'm going to turn the light on so we can see. And you can see, hopefully you can see good shadow definition right there, and that way as we move this light without hitting the camera, we should be able to see what needs to be brought down and what doesn't. Now, from past experience, I know that most of it is going to be, you know, we're going to be pretty good 1/4 of an inch away from that line, and it just needs to be brought around. Well, here we go. What I usually do is just make a whole pass and then just tilt the rasp just a little more. Make another pass, another more of a tilt. Another pass. Now by the time you get out here to being more or less horizontal, and you usually wind up taking more from the farther down the neck you go, the more you have to take out, seems like, and I guess that's just how I cut them to begin with. Whoops. Now we'll reset the camera on the other side. I reviewed the previous clip, and realize that we are very, very yellow, but I warned you about that, so if I can get it out in the editing process, I will, and if I can't, I just have to live with it. We'll do the same thing. Start here at a certain angle. Pass. Change the angle just a little bit. Another pass. Another angle change, another pass. And you'll find that that'll get 90% of what needs to be taken off at this point. Now I have needle rasps. Those are just smaller rasps. I want to go back over the whole thing. And what this really does is just kind of takes those real rough rasp marks out. Then we're going to do basically the same thing that we did earlier. We're going to do the 60 grit paper, and then we're going to start scraping it with glass. So now the neck is roughly shaped and sized. I'm going to take some glass next and get the rasp marks out as best I can. And then I'm going to take some 60 grit paper and get the glass marks out as best I can. And then we're going to see what it needs. There'll probably be a few humps left or some places that need to have an area that kind of has a little bit of an angle to it. And we're just going to cut all those places out and smooth everything up. But first, we need to get the rasp marks out. Now I'm feeling this right here just to make sure that there's no big humps that are escaping me, and for the most part that feels okay. Now I have a 3.5 by 6 inch piece of 1/4 inch thick plywood I wrap 60 grit paper with, and I do this because as I run my fingers right down through here, I can feel all kinds of little tiny humps where the glass kind of bounced over the curl and just kind of, it's not bad, but it's, of course it has to be gotten out. So this 60 grit paper, making sure that I kind of stay away from that right there. I don't always use that, but sometimes it's a handy thing to have around. Everything kind of just rides straight with that line of the neck. So now everything is more or less shaped, more or less 60 grit down. I have my tester gauge and the first fret thickness. This way we want to be 870 thousandths. So I'm going to stick that right in there. It's really, really tight and it just barely wants to go on, which is fine because we've still got 80 grit and 100 grit and 220 grit paper to go before we can shoot finish on this. So I'm going to leave that right there. It's heavy, it's tight, and I bet you it won't be by the time we're done. At the 8th fret It is 940 thousandths. It slips on just a little easier than the first fret, but nevertheless, I can't really jam it all the way on there, so that's good as well. So I'm going to go back to this jig. This one that holds this mandolin up sideways, because for me, it's easier to sand this thing out by when it's up right like this, and I can just sand around to this half and then just turn the instrument over and sand around to that half. So that's what we're going to do next. I'm going to sand this thing down probably to 100 grit. I am now going to take 80 grit paper. I'm going to start up here at this corner and use backers, a little rounded one and flat one, maybe this one here, just whatever I need to back this sandpaper. And I'm going to start cleaning this instrument from this tip all the way down to about right here, down to 80 grit paper. One of the reasons I like this fixture to do this sanding job on a mandolin is that I can change the angles, which makes it really convenient and comfortable when you're working on the heel and you just want to work your way around. You know, and then you tilt it up a little more and keep going. It's very, very convenient. Now, if you'll recall, earlier I said I was going to start at this corner and work my way down. And I do that. I'm working with 80 grit paper. I usually take a look at the sides at this point in the game. Quite often I've already touched them and went over them and smoothed them up and got all the excess glue off of them and that sort of thing. But sometimes I haven't. This one I haven't. So while I'm here, I'll go ahead and just keep going with 80 grit paper all the way around and then turn it around and go this way until I meet at the bottom and get everything 80 grit papered. And I also know that earlier I said I was going to take it down probably to 100 grit, but quite often I don't. I'll stop at 80, and the reason I do that is simply it still doesn't have frets in it, so it's still got to go in there and fit in the fretting jig, which will maybe put some marks on the back of the neck, and then I'd have to sand them out. So quite often I'm shooting. Obviously, you want to get all the way down to 220 grit, but you want to bring it down in such a manner so that you're not scratching over here and having to go back and fix that before you can move on to something else and bounce back and forth. So we may just go down to 80 grit on this particular mandolin and go do the fret job and then come back and do the 100 grit paper. So that's kind of how that works. You're just kind of working your way down the obvious stuff to the final goal, which is 220 all over and ready to put the stain on. I think that covers about 99% of the stuff that you need to know about sizing and shaping a neck. I've got this one down 80 grit. I did elect to just not go to 120, and I also cleaned this panel up here, started down here and worked my way all the way around and then come down this side. So this one is ready for the frets now, 80 gritted and shaped. It feels good. There's no humps and bumps. The heel is smooth. These little peg head ears are smooth. Everything is ready for the next finer grit of paper. And that's pretty much what I'm going to be doing all week. There are a couple of mandolins here that's going to get binding on the peg head, and so hopefully we'll get their necks sized and shaped and cleaned up and the binding started on those as well this week. And that's pretty much going to be a full week, and anything else I'll just have to share with you on the next episode of the Ratliff Mandolins Weekly Production Diary. Check back with us each and every week, and thank you so much for staying till the very end. We'll see you on the next episode.